for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world.
So I got myself the Minirig 2.1 system. I'd hummed and hawed about it for maybe a couple of years. Why did I do that? Because when I was listening to online comparisons, it made it sound a little bit hard, and I like a lush, sweet, full spectrum sound, balanced bass, not looking for a huge bass slam. It sounded a bit on the clinical side, maybe, you know. I do like my sound to be immersive. It means stereo. It means normally I'm buying two speakers, separating them out, playing them in stereo, because for me I like to feel I'm immersed in it. It's not about a big boom. Look, a big bass is nice, a deep bass is nice, but not over-egged. I didn't think the high price was going to be worth it. Now I'm saying high price, a lot of people say they're great value. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the Minirig. They come as an individual, I would say, a modular system. So you can buy a single Minirig. These are the version 2s, version 2 for the sub as well. It's a modular system, I would say, because you can buy one, you can buy two for stereo, you can buy one and one sub, 1.1, tremendously fill out the bass, or you can have a 2.1, you can 2.2, and probably the ultimate is a 4.2, because for me, I think two Minirigs in low gain mode, I'll get onto the gain mode, sounds nicest with and having the sub in high gain. However, that's me, and I don't, you know, it's getting ridiculous money. When you start building like that, you might as well get a proper hi-fi, but then again, I guess you're getting this because you don't want proper hi-fi, you want true portability. I'm not going to cover everything in this video. It's impossible. There are so many ways to play the Minirig system, and that is the point. I'm not saying when you get a 2.2, that is the greatest sound you're ever going to get, and you'll never have to buy anything else. There's always going to be something you want a bit different. There's always another speaker does something in a different way. The point being, there isn't anything else that offers the number of variations and the way you can use this system. And for me, that is the deal maker. When you get your second one, it's a question, should you get the sub or get another one for stereo? I would say get the sub before the other one. The element it increases your enjoyment by is greater than the stereo element. Then get your second one. So just to quickly take you through examples of building your system, this is a quick comparison. I'm going to say my favorite way of playing them is with leaving the sub in high gain, because I get the most dynamic range out of it. I like a lot of dynamic range. If you're into classical music and stuff like that, you really want a lot of high dynamic sound, you're going to want it in high gain. Technically, it's not the most balanced. You may find the sub is overpowering. I like it in that mode. I don't normally like a big overblown bass. I have to say, with the Minirig subwoofer, so well balanced that even in so-called over-the-top mode, it's still balanced to my ears, just very, very dynamic. You may not like how dynamic it is, and then you'll go to what they call balance mode. That means having them in the same mode. Just to say, I personally prefer the Minirig in low gain, the sub in high gain. That's not what they basically recommend, although it's up to you how you like it. I just want to point that out while I do this comparison, because it may sound in my clip that the sub is overpowering the Minirig. It's only a quick comparison for fun elements, and I have to say in real life, it doesn't really do that. It's very hard to record a highly dynamic track and get that over on a comparison clip. If you're trying to keep it from clipping, you're always going to have a problem with the main body of the music sounding as though it's a little bit under volume. Here's my comparison clips of building your system. If you're in the UK, you will know why I will laugh when I say, would you buy a speaker off of Mr. D. Trotter?
What a plonker, what a plonker.
Now, If you're not in the UK, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about and why that's quite funny. Because D Trotter is obviously Del Trotter. The Minirig is the brainchild of the engineer, Mr. David Trotter. It's quite interesting because he started a forum thread, speakerplans.com, Minirig topic 38574. And that was back in 2010, and he detailed from the beginning of his idea all the way along to the thread is still going to current now, and you can trace the idea and the different variations and all the talk and thoughts he had about the speaker. And the thing is, this is not JBL, this is not Sony telling their marketing department to find something for the masses. This is a guy who's a speaker lover, who's into his speakers. This is what he's come out with. And actually, Minirig, who are actually a company called Pasce Limited, and there's two guys running it, David Trotter and Thomas Tucker. I kid you not, Tucker and Trotter, and one is a designer, one is an engineer. It's a British-based company working out of Bristol. It's not that cheap. We're talking £129 for each, whether it's the Minirig 2, because they do a Minirig Mini, by the way, but I'm talking about my Minirig 2. Each component is £129, I think, and 95 pence. You can buy them in bundles of 2.1. I'm going to say something that people don't seem to point out, and caught me out, is that one subwoofer is designed to match one Minirig. The bundles go up to 2.1 system. Most people talk about the 2.1 system. And you would assume you get your two stereo speakers and your sub and they're matched. No, actually, the outputs are matched 1-to-1, which means if you have a 2.1 system and you go into the app and you want to play it in the most balanced way, it will reduce the output on the Minirigs 2 to match the sub, which means you won't get full volume if you want a nice balanced sound. On paper, 30 watts subwoofer, 15 watt Minirig, you're assuming 2 matches 1, and no, even if you ask Minirig themselves, they're open. The way it works and the fact that when you've got them in stereo, the sub is playing both channels, it's not a match sound, it's not balanced. So the design is 1-to-1. The other thing I want to point out, which caught me out, it's really all about high gain, low gain. So obviously, high gain, you're getting, the preamp is giving a stronger signal to the amp itself, but it's going to be a little bit noisier, and that's the point. So low gain offers the best quality, but high gain offers the most volume. Just to make that clear, low gain is the highest quality mode. It gives the best balanced sound. High gain is a little bit screechy, thinner sound. But if you're playing in low gain, that's another reason why I got the 2.2. It's the volume is not, you know, it's probably not what you're used to with the other off-the-shelf JBLs, Sonys, and etc. It's a little bit under, but it's a higher quality, and that's the point. You have all these options. Now, there's two ways of doing the gain. The first thing to note is both the sub and both the Minirig have two auxiliary inputs. In the middle, you have your charging port. Now the thing is, this is a 5.5, 2.1 millimeter DC charging port. It comes with a USB end on it. That's why you can charge it off of USB, but it gives you other options. It's worth noting that David himself has said it's perfectly fine to use a 9-volt transformer to power that Minirig 2, which means you can play it at full volume while it's charging without the charge running out. You can use a 12-volt transformer on the sub, but don't use the 12-volt on the Minirig. You can use a 12-volt transformer to power the subwoofer, and it will carry on playing and not drain. So you're getting more power in than it's using to play. If you're using the 5-volt lead, which obviously you're going to be using, if you use the adapter they give you, it's going to run down still while it's on charge and you're still playing it. So you've got two jack inputs. The jack nearest the grill on whether it's the Minirig or the subwoofer is the high gain. But you also have on each of them your one LED. Now all the information is coming from this one LED. When it's on, and I'm going to show you, first thing you'll notice is it will come on with a welcome tone. And you do have to hold it down to get that tone. That's one funny thing. So the Minirig comes on with a welcome tone. The subwoofer doesn't. And I don't know it's on until I take my finger off, because you can't see the colour. But it is still a long hold, and that's important because a lot of these things, the options on here, are a short press. Now, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, changing the gain. So it comes on in high gain mode. The only way you know it's in high gain mode is the color of that LED. It's not going to change color for low gain. It's going to stay the same color but go a little less bright. And this is ridiculous, I think, because if I'm out in the sun, I have no idea what gain is in. Really bright light, I can't see the difference in color. The only way I can see, and I'll show you, hang on, if I just press it one time and it'll go to low gain, now I can see that's slightly faded. I wonder if you can. It's only by getting close up and looking to see if it's actually faded. If I just come back now, and I'm not quite sure if that's fully bright or it's half bright. So this really gets me because it does change color. The power levels are indicated by that LED changing to cyan and then finally red, and there's another, and I think like a violet in between. It does change color. Couldn't they reserve one color for the gain? Then it would be a breeze to quickly look and see which color it is. I know what gain modes it is. Now, I know you've got your gain inputs. That's for using it in wired mode. I'm not going to do anything about wired mode here. I'm going to do that another day. If you're using it in Bluetooth, it's only going to change gain with that LED. And my point being here is you've still got your two jacks in. So I was a little bit confused. I've got to match the gain. You have to use the sub with the Minirig. It has to be wired. So this isn't Bluetooth, the sub. So I'm thinking, so is it really important for me to know which gain to use? Does it matter if I go into the high gain or the low gain? It turns out when I'm using this in Bluetooth, it really doesn't matter. And by the way, all these ports are two-way. I'll get onto that at some other point. But it doesn't matter because whether I plug this into the high gain, which is nearest the grill, or the low gain, which is nearest the rear port, it's still the same. If I attach that to low gain and I leave that in high gain mode, it's the same as high gain on the other input. And if I put it in low gain there and I put it on low gain in the high gain port, it's still the same volume. I thought maybe there's 4 ways of doing it. High-low gain on the high gain port and then a high-low on the low gain port, and perhaps that gives me 4 different levels of gain. No, you still only got 2 levels. I like it in 2.2 and I think I'd love it in 4.2, just the money would be ridiculous. However, I understand most people will use it in 2.1 because it sounds like that should be the system. However, got to point out again, one sub matches one Minirig. So really the bundle should give you a 2.2 option. And so people would understand 2.1 is not actually balanced. And if you want full volume, you need a 2.2. However, because most people will use it that way, this is my comparison. 2.1 versus 2.2. I'm throwing in an Xtreme 2 just for comparison purposes. I know a lot of you will already have a handle on the Xtreme 2, and so we'll be able to tell some of the differences between them.
I'm walking alone, the streets are empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. I'm walking alone, the streets are empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. I'm walking alone, the streets are empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul.
So just want to start by showing you the original track, because the point to note here is it's quite dynamic. If you look at the bass peak just above, well, around 45 Hertz, it's just under 10 decibels. You've got your mid peaks around 18 decibels. So there's about an 8 decibel difference between the mid peak and the bass peak. And then your high peak around 39 decibels. There's about a 29 decibel difference between the high peak and the bass peak. It's quite dynamic. And that's the point. This is the 2.1 setup. What I'm trying to show you is how dynamic the mini rigs are. It's not compressed. It's not a compressed sound. So it may not be absolutely accurate, but it's dynamic, which is part of the immersiveness of a setup like this that makes it more enjoyable. The mid peak, around 25 decibels. The bass peak, 14 decibels. About 11 decibels, a little bit. So the bass is a little bit over-egged, but it's dynamic. It's recreating how dynamic that original track was. There's 11 decibels difference there. There was an 8 decibel difference on the original track. The high peak, around 45 decibels, 14 decibels, the bass peak, about a 31 decibel difference. The original track, 29 decibels. It's almost bang on between the high peak and the bass peak. Just to first show you the difference between the 2.2 and the 2.1 setup. You can see the bass is fuller on the 2.2. The peak is the same, about 58 Hertz, but it's fuller. The roll-off is less steep. I mean, it's not huge, but it's enough that you can hear it, and it's real. So the difference between a 2.1 and a 2.2 is a fuller, fatter bass. It's not going any deeper, of course. It's still the same sub, just there's two of them, but you've got a fuller bass. You've got a separate left channel, a separate right channel. So although bass should be non-directional, it is a bit directional. At the end of the day, it does help the stereo image. Now the 2.2, the difference, the mid-range, 23 and 14, as opposed to 25, 14. So that 23 and 14, 9 decibels, almost bang on the 8 decibel difference on the original track. And then again at the peak, on the highs, it's around 42 decibels, a 28 decibel difference, 29 on the original. So my point being, when you get the mini rigs, you're getting something that approaches the original dynamics of the original track. And when you go to the Xtreme 2, you can see the compressed nature of the sound. So although on an quick A/B listen, it kind of holds up, you know, at these low volumes against the mini rigs. But once you start having a discerning ear, once you start really delving into the music, and it's not just a case of, oh, I like that bass, the difference is pretty stark and obvious. And here you can see there is no difference there, but the bass peak is still there, although it's a bit higher than the mini rigs. It's about 65 Hertz. 17 decibels, about 20 decibels at best, isn't it? So there's like 2-3 decibel difference between the mids and the bass. So it's not as dynamic as the mini rigs. It's a compressed sound. The sound's there. It's simply not dynamic. There isn't the enjoyment and the immersiveness to the sound. Again, if you check the highs, 39 decibels, 17 decibels, it just hasn't got the dynamic range. And that's why in these A/B comparisons, when I just put up the clip and I'm trying to get the volumes as even as possible, and I'm trying to normalize for the peaks, so it's not clipping in any way, it gives advantages to the Xtreme 2. It gives advantages to the less dynamic tracks when you get these online comparisons, because there's a big difference between the high peaks and the rest of the music. And so if you're trying to normalize between peaks, the body of the music is going to sound a little bit quieter, a little bit less there on the more dynamic tracks. So I think it's something you've got to bear in mind when you hear a comparison between a dynamic speaker and a less dynamic speaker. It's going to favor the less dynamic speaker because there's no way to really get over the true dynamic nature of the sound through the vast array of equipment that people are listening on. So quickly, just to let you know, the subs all come with your splitter if you want to use them wired in stereo. Now they say it goes louder in wired mode. I haven't tried it yet because it's been a nightmare trying to work out the best ways to use it as it is. I want to point out about this lead, it's mono. If you're thinking you can use this with other speakers, put one end in your phone and then one end to each of your other speakers to get left, right. These are mono ends. You'll only fire up one speaker if you're using a speaker with two internal speakers or more than one driver, because these are of course only got one driver. They will only fire up one driver on any speaker you plug it into. I just wanted to point that out. And of course the Minirig itself comes with the auxiliary lead, which you're going to need either to connect to another Minirig, and I will say that you can daisy chain all this. You can daisy chain out of the sub, because all these inputs are both an input and output. They will give out what they're giving in. So if I feed, for instance, my phone into the sub, although the sub will only play from like 200 hertz down, it will output the full range to another speaker. Now, same thing with the Minirigs. I don't know what the limit is on daisy chaining, but I would imagine theoretically it's unlimited. But you daisy chain them by, I'll put that in Bluetooth. I can have that attached to my sub, but I can still output from the other jack. It knows what's happening with the other jacks, and it will be an output, and it will output the whole signal, and then I can daisy chain to another one, and then I can daisy chain on. It's useful to know you can use a 12-volt transformer on your sub and a 9-volt transformer on your Minirig version 2, just to say they come well packed in the big carton like that for the sub and the carton like that for your Minirig. And then you even get a nice cover for each of them. There's a little cover there for the Minirig, and then an even more useful one because you can open both ends, leave your sub in there because it's even got an opening for the leads. And also I should say, when you get the 2.1 bundle, it comes with a rucksack. I open it, admit, I don't know where to put it. I've lost it, so I can't show it to you. I'm going to say, although you can technically put up to 4 Minirigs and 1 sub, I found it a bit fiddly to use that way. I didn't really like using it that way. I haven't used it. However, just 25 quid on its own, but it comes with the 2.1s if you buy the bundle. Well, it did when I got it. I assume it does always. The tech specs. Bluetooth 4.2. It's got a 70mm driver. Actually, I think it's 72mm, but I'm not quite sure. Some stats are a bit mixed up. It is 15 watts. Now, it's rated 70 to 16,000 hertz. So there's a little bit of a roll off, and I have to say, you notice it in the low gain rather than the high gain mode. I do notice it. Some people argue, well, you wouldn't really notice it. So I do kind of notice it. You know, there have to be some trade-offs, and it's still a small system, isn't it? So I do notice that a little bit. So if there was any negatives, that would be one of them. There's a bit of a roll-off. And I believe all these frequency response stats are within plus or minus 3 decibels. Now, the big thing about Minirig is the battery life is incredible. Now, I'm going to tell you straight off the bat, it's been a nightmare trying to get used to knowing which way to use it. I haven't tested battery life, but I haven't seen anything to say anything against what they publish on their own website, which is for the Minirig version 2 in high gain, high volume. So I believe that's at maximum volume. It will play for 15 hours. And if you're playing it on low volume, it will play for up to 80 hours. But 15 hours at high gain, that's serious battery life. The subwoofer. Oh, and I should also mention, supports aptX AAC. 74mm driver. By the way, I believe this is aluminium. 74mm driver, 30 watts amplifier. The interesting bit is, when you hook it up to your Minirig, there's no crossover in the Minirig. It passes the full frequency signal to the sub. The sub uses its own limiter to then play just the bass elements on the music. Now, it's interesting because that then allows you to pass the full signal again out for daisy chaining, 48 hertz to 150 hertz. Another reason for 2.2, because that so-called crossover, even at their stated 150 hertz, is quite high. A lot of male voices are going to go well below that. There's a crossover, and that's the thing. So normally they would say, well, you can hide your subwoofer away, it's not directional, and you just stick your woofer out there. Well, not really, because it's going to be a bit disjointed. You're going to get some vocals off of your Minirig and some off your sub. So you really need to keep them tight together. Another reason why, if you want to split them far apart stereo, you don't want some of your right channel coming across from the left-hand side. Another reason, when you go 2.2, it only plays left, only plays right. Another thing, I don't know, at some point I need to get to, but that's the point. A lot of this stuff, you have to work with their app. The battery life of the subwoofer, 10 hours to 80 hours. So up to 10 hours at maximum volume. You will notice it's a bass reflex design. Why is that significant? Well, because that's the difference between a sealed enclosure and a non-sealed with a port. It allows it to go a little bit deeper, but it's going to be a little bit woolly. So I have to say, if there's any criticisms, I love this system, don't get me wrong, I will recommend it to everybody in my auntie. It's a little bit woolly, so it's not tight. You know, some people will want a quick, tight bass. I would say it was a little bit loose, a little bit woolly. As you push it, you really do hear a little bit of difference between the rear port and the front, you know, with the front driver. And that's the thing, there's a slight timing issue when you use a port. However, it does sound pretty. I'm not saying anything against it, I'm just saying out of interest, it's a ported design. On paper, that means it's going to be a little bit looser, and it does sound a little bit looser, but you know, it's still a good tight thump to it. But you can hear that looseness to it. You can build this system, you don't have to buy it. What do I mean by that? So you can buy just one mini rig. It does still sound great. You then, if you want to build your system, you've got a choice of getting a sub or another mini rig for stereo. I'm going to point out that if you play it in stereo, a really good thing here with the mini rigs is that you can link them in stereo. So once you've linked them and gone into your app and said you want them locked that way, you never have to bother again. Goodbye JBL, this is how you do it. So if I want to put on my main one, which is why I got it labelled, and the thing is you only want one connected to your phone, you better know which one it is, that's why I would do it this way with my main one. I turn that on, I turn this on, that little ding should mean they are now locked. I didn't have to do anything else to get them in stereo. That is brilliant. So, you know, I always play my speakers in stereo. I'm fed up when having to, especially with JBL, go into the app every single time. Look, wait till they can get it recognised, then hit stereo, and then if I turn it off, I've got to do the whole thing again. I just started them up. Went straight to stereo because I said lock in that mode in the app. That is brilliant. And it's locked for the gain mode as well. So if I switch this one to low gain, that one goes to low gain as well. I hope you can see that. So I'll do that again. If I switch this one to high gain, that one's gone to high gain. That is brilliant. There are so many ways of using your mini rigs. One of them is, are you going to place it up like that? Or are you going to place it like that? Or somewhere in between? My own personal preference. Obviously, if you're moving around a room and you're not going to listen to it face on, you're going to have it up. There'd be no point in having it face on if you're behind it. But if you are trying to listen to music in some sort of immersive way, where you're listening to elements of the music and you want to pick out bits, you need it in stereo mode, which is the whole point of stereo, and you want your drivers face on. If I have them face on in high gain mode, it's too screechy, it's too thin for me. I have it in high, so in other words, I put them, my preferred mode is face on, low gain, but I still want the subs in high gain. It's clear that there's a little bit of a high end boost to help off axis. So this is my comparison of on axis versus off axis.
superhuman, I'm breaking. Don't let me fall apart. Don't let me fall apart.
What I should be saying is, of course, when I listen in off axis, obviously I'm leaving it in high gain because I'm losing too much treble otherwise. So I listen low gain that way, high gain that way. And depending on your taste, of course, you're going to have to keep changing the gain on your sub. No easy way to do that. So you get the app. Now, something else to remember. When you attach one sub to either of your mini rigs, it will automatically play left and right channel. When you want 2.2, of course, you want only the right side to play the right channel, the left side to play left channel. The only way to do that is to fire up the Minirig app and set it that way. They have a 2.2 mode where it says play in full volume. It doesn't say we're setting it to left and right. That's effectively what it's doing when it says maximum volume. So the thing to remember is, if you want to go left, right, and not have the sub play both channels, you have to use the 2.2 mode in the app. So I don't think it explains it properly. I'm just letting you know that's what you have to do. If you set it to 2.1 mode, as I've been saying in the app, it reduces the volume automatically on the mini rigs to match the sub. That's the thing. So I didn't know that when I got my bundle. I assumed everything was full volume. Nobody said one sub matches one mini rig. And if you get a 2.1 bundle, even their own app will reduce the volume output. And for a lot of people, it's all about high volume. And talking about high volume and maximum volume, you're probably wondering how loud it goes and is it good for an outdoor party? And is it better than the Xtreme 1, which most people say is better than the Xtreme 2 outdoors because it's got more bass slam? And just for that, and just for kicks, I'm not saying they're any way comparable. Maximum volume, using the app where it specifically says maximum volume, and then just firing the app and not using the app. And also, against the Xtreme 1, how loud do these things go?
The stormy seas, oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. You meant the world to me. Stormy seas, oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. You meant the world to me. Stormy seas, oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. You meant the world to me.
So first of all, the actual maximum volumes. The Xtreme 1 is 2.5 decibels quieter at maximum volume than the mini rigs, even with reduced volume in their app to match the mini rigs to the subwoofer. On the actual peaks, it's 3.8 decibels quieter than the mini rig when it's got reduced volume. The mini rig on full volume, when you don't use the app, when you just use everything at its maximum volume, the Xtreme 1 is 4.6 decibels quieter and 6.2 decibels quieter on the actual peaks. So I'm not trying to compare the Xtreme 1, which you can obviously buy for less than half the price of a 2.1 package. I'm trying to give a reference point. And in terms of sheer loudness, you know, a lot of people weren't happy with the Xtreme 2 because it didn't go have the bass slam of the Xtreme 1. Just to give you, you know, some reference point, you're talking a whole level again up with the 2.1, not even the 2.2, with the 2.1 Minirig. So even if you use the app to reduce the Minirigs to, in their opinion, match the subwoofer in a balanced way, you're still talking, you know, around 3 decibels. If you, if you take the average and the peak, you're talking around 3 decibels, which is the equivalent of doubling the power. 2 Minirigs and a subwoofer on paper is 60 watts, and it really is double what the extreme one is on battery, 30 watts. So that's what you get, but it's not just louder. You still get a bit of bass that you wouldn't get on the extreme one. Look, I know the extreme one is an old speaker. I'm just trying to, if it's all about bass slam and maximum volume, it's a whole different league when you go to the Minirig setup. And between the Minirig on reduced volume, because you're using the app to balance, and on full volume, you get another 2.5 decibels louder by not using the app and playing them at full volume. So, you know, if you really want to go extreme party levels, don't use the app to play them in a balanced way, just play them at full volume. The peak that you lose by using the app to balance them is 2.5 decibels. So it's pretty significant. However, it is balanced when you use the app. It's not so balanced when you don't use the app, but it really depends on your taste, what you're trying to get out of it. So you probably noticed something not quite right when you're comparing the bass with the extreme one on the so-called bigger bass of the Minirigs 2.1. Now, the Minirigs do go louder, but the peaks are in the mids, not in the bass, which is where you may be expecting me to be talking about when I'm saying the extreme has lower peaks, because the bass peak around 75 hertz, 28 decibels, is louder than on the Minirigs. However, having said that it's got a high bass peak, and obviously it has got, as we know, the extremely boosted bass. The bass does go deeper on the 2.1, so it has the bass peak on the extreme one and then a rapid roll off, whereas on the 2.1 it's going deeper, it's fuller, but it just doesn't have the bass peak. However, between the 2.1 using the app and not using the app, it's the opposite what you expect. So you go in, reduce the Minirig's volume to match the one sub, you're not expecting it to change the sub output. And looking at that graph on a one-off basis, there's a big roll-off, not using the app. Almost as though the app's giving it more bass, rather than just reduced volume on the Minirigs. So having seen the anomaly in the maximum charts for the 2.1 setup, I was wondering, did using the app affect the bass response of the sub? Or is it simply the way I recorded it, with the 2 subs behind the main drivers drowning out some of that bass to some extent, whereas with the extreme one, the passive radiators in line with the main drivers, it's slanted the difference in terms of the recording. I was interested in how the app affected it and what the sub was really doing at maximum level. Does it really reduce that much, or was it the way I recorded it? Basically, my bad, I messed up the way I recorded it. However, I've recorded the 1.1 and I've recorded them with both drivers, the sub driver, the mid-high range driver face on, and it tells a different story. So the first story is whether I use the app, section that reduces the Minirig output, if I use the section that makes it maximum. Basically, there is no difference. The difference between 26.9, 27.2, no difference in real life, and the actual bass peak exactly the same. And at maximum volume, the good news is still peaking at 75 hertz, and that's at maximum volume, remember. So that's as low as they will reduce the bass, which is still a reasonable bass. 75 hertz, not many years ago, would have been considered really good low-end bass, you know, when you're playing mid-volume. So just to show you, yeah, I think it was a problem with the way I recorded it. Another time I will go back and re-record it, but quite honestly, I need a time when the neighbours aren't around if I'm going to really be playing that 2.2, 2.1 system full volume for any reasonable length of time, and I want to get one with my neighbours. So that is the honest reason I'm not redoing it at the moment. I redid it with a 1.1 at maximum, and as you can see, bass is going pretty deep at top volume, 1.1, and it didn't make any difference whether I used the app or what app setting I used.
So I've gone over the basics, and it really is the basics, I have to tell you, and I'm going to have to follow up in a whole bunch of videos if I want to do justice to this system. This is a great system. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing ever made, but it is in the sense that it's got the greatest number of variations in the way you can use it. I can go mobile with me one speaker in my car, I can go mobile for stereo travel very nice and light, or I can decide to take a sub with it, or I can go 2.1, or I can go 2.2, depending on where I'm going to use it. The most awkward part of it, of course, is the charging. I've got to charge up 4 different things. It would be nice if they come out with some sort of in-house power pack where you could actually charge 4 things at once. However, that's something else for another day. Just to say the point about the battery level bin indicator. Now you don't have to turn them on to know what level it's on, and it will change colour, the LED, depending on the level of charge. So whether it's on or off, if I just want to know the charge, I've got to know the colours. It goes green 75%, cyan 50 to 75%, blue 25 to 50%, purple 5 to 25%, and red is basically 0. You're out of luck. Don't have to. Now the thing about turning on does require long hold. If I just press it once, it'll go green, then turn off. So that's how I know what the charge is. That means it's somewhere between 75 and 100%. So yeah, that's quite nice to be able to just quickly do that. But however, when it's on, you know, everything is all about this one LED. And I find the most infuriating thing I'm going to say is knowing when it's in low gain or high gain. Why couldn't that have been one of these charging colours and get rid of one of these charging elements and just swap that colour over to this? Like, we don't need the cyan at 50 to 75%. Let me have the cyan on here to tell me it's in, say, low gain or high gain. That would have been great. Talking about the app, I'm going to wrap up this video by saying the app. Now, one thing you can do with the app, you can set your LED to be in time to the music, that little LED. So it's kind of like poor man's Sony, but then, you know, it's not really what audiophiles want. I suppose it's really subtle, isn't it, that one LED, but they say, oh, it's just there if you want it, but, you know, some people may frown at it and say, well, it's not a serious speaker then, is it? But it's there if you want. Just to say, there is a separate app to update them. So you can change the gain via the app. You can go into your app. As I said, you've got modes for mono link up. You've got your stereo mini rigs with 2 subs. Doesn't make it clear it's playing left and right channel. I don't know if they're going to think, well, you should get that from the picture, but. And then you've got to set it in the stereo mini rigs. You can see at the top it's telling me level of charge. Now there is a bit here for setting EQ levels. They've got something called a studio, and then the studio was up. I didn't understand what they were. I asked them on the chat, and they said, well, it's not working yet anyway. We'll let you know when it's working. It seems to change the sound, but I don't quite in a subtle way. But I don't know if it's meant to do that or not. To lock them wirelessly, go into your options. And there you have your options for wireless stereo lock. And you can change things like pause, play, skip track, turn off automatically, power saving, dim the LEDs. So there's some options, but not think that I really would be using. And change the volumes. You can play via the app, but it's not brilliant. And it's been a little bit flaky. However, the most useful thing is I was able to lock the speakers into stereo mode via that and never have to worry about the app again. So I'm going to break it down in other videos sometime in the future. Things like, you know, I know someone's going to say, what's it sound like against the Flip 4? What's it like against the Charge 3? Is it loud? So all these questions are pretty obvious, and I'd like to answer myself, to be quite honest with you. I will do in future videos, and they'll be shorter. I've tried to get through as much as I can, because a lot of the information I didn't know. Even though I'd been watching some of the videos, read some of the reviews, it wasn't obvious to me, some of the things. Especially this game, you know, I didn't realise how much of using it was about what game mode you're in and the ability to know what game mode you're in. And that has actually become a big deal. So please, Minirig gives us a different colour for high gain and low gain. But I really do love this system. It is on the pricey side. It is worth it, especially if you like an immersive sound, a big punchy outdoors. Your main problem is lots of speakers, each one needs to be charged separately. However, you won't have to do it very often, up to 80 hours, but you're probably using it near maximum. So 10 hours, 15 hours is still massive. That's, you know, still for most people that's going to be a complete day. And if you use the 9 volt, 12 volt transformer, you can play it forever. It won't run down. So all in all, you know, it's a real music lover's system. Not saying it's the excellent, and you're not going to have something to say against it. I'm just saying there's so many ways of using it. It's always going to be around, even if you buy other speakers to go with it. You know, there are times when I just play the 2 on their own in low gain mode. It sounds great for low volume. So that's the thing, I can go from very, very low volume to very high volume. I just can't do this buying any one other speaker when I can do with this system. I know it's expensive. I do think it's worth it because it covers really every eventuality. Well, I hope you watched to the end, and thank you for watching.
UK